Poetry is something that's always been challenging for me. I mean, there's some poems out there that are just simple and really beautiful and profound, but there's some poems that are profound and I have no idea what they mean. To me, and the rest of the people like me, educate me, Ethan, on why I should care.
There's all sorts of articles out there that give you advice on, oh, how to read poetry like a professor, or how to read poetry like a scholar. Why should we? Like, sit down and appreciate the poem for being a beautiful poem. You don't have to go line by line and syllable by syllable and word by word and dissect it. From my study, I see in the lamplight descending the broad hall stair, grave Alice, and laughing Allegra, and Edith with golden hair. Do you think, O blue-eyed banditti, because you have scaled the wall, such an old mustache as I am, is not a match for you all? I have you fast in my fortress, and I will not let you depart, but put you down into the dungeon in the round tower of my heart.
What are we drinking tonight, Ethan?
Or that good old Bombay gin. The old straight English gin.
I mean, if you like it, you can't argue.
Well,
So,
one of these days I'll have, you know, some tonic water to be able to make a gin and tonic, but not complaining that all I have is the gin.
no, I
Good
can't.
for the
So,
throat, good for the sinuses.
so you've got that. Um, there's the cast finish gin that we've had and mentioned on this podcast umpteen million times.
Mm-hmm.
If the Pinckney Bend cask finished gin is a 10 out of 10, what's the Bombay gin at?
I give this a 6.
6? Okay.
5 to 6. It's pretty good.
It
I don't
sounds
know
so
that
good,
there
though.
is a better gin anywhere than that cask gin.
I mean, I have very limited experience, but
And
I
I'm
haven't
just
had any.
I'm
That's
just
fair.
gonna rub it in the faces of everybody that doesn't live in Missouri or parts of Illinois and Iowa that can't buy it yet.
Like myself. But it was very good.
You've also got excuses to come and visit.
I do. So, and you know I'll be bringing a bottle back when I next visit. So, it's going to be good.
Yeah, I know. And a friend of ours says he wants to bring back like 7. So
Yeah, there might be plenty coming back in that car. With everything we're going to be bringing, I don't know how everything's going to fit in my SUV between the four of us and camping gear and other things. And yeah, it's going to be fun.
especially since one of the guys you're bringing takes up enough room for at least 2.
This is true. He'll have seating space, but yeah, that'll be fun. That'll be fun. Everybody might just have to have like 3 swords on their lap at all times.
I don't think anybody will complain about that.
True. No. Got a sword in one hand, I got my Culver's lunch in another. Like, this is the life, you know? How can you argue? So, for my drink, I thought about going like bold with the cantilever in terms of the flavor and stuff. I thought about going mild with the Avon rye that I had. And I kind of decided to go down the middle and a little bit fruity. And so I ended up with Four Roses small batch yet again. So,
See, Four Roses is one. It may not be objectively the best. It may not even be subjectively the best for some people. But you taste it, and it's always one that will be good.
hmm
Four Roses is never a bad choice.
Cannot argue.
And kind of whatever context you're drinking in, it's probably even the right choice most of the time.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I'm drinking a $28, $30 bottle of whiskey. That's very good. When would you want more than that? If you want to go higher class or you want to go for an Irish or a Scotch or something that it isn't, then I guess fair enough. But if you just want a simple, good bourbon that's should please the palate, can't argue.
I mean, that is one of my arguments of why Quiet Man is so good.
That's, yeah.
Because
Quiet
even
Man
though
is
it may not be
amazing
the
song.
best, it may not be the best, and I will admit that it may not be the best. It is my favorite, and it is always a good choice to have.
Well, yeah, but I mean, I might even think that it's better than that if I'm just, from what I remember of the tastes of both, like, I'd pick it over Connemara. And Connemara is more expensive by a
Yeah.
little bit. You know, I wouldn't pick it over Redbreast, but Redbreast is
Well, neither
its
would
own.
I.
It's its own thing.
But
But
at $75 a bottle,
yeah, but I just picked it over a bottle that goes for maybe 50 now. I don't know what you can get Connemara for it, but I know it's more expensive than when we first bought it
yeah,
years ago. So Quiet Man is still sub 30.
maybe just barely, and it depends on the time and where you're at. But yeah,
Hmm. For sure.
yeah. And while it may not be objectively better than Redbreast, I will say that if I were to have the choice, my inclination would be to choose the Redbreast. However, like I said, the $75 a bottle, or whatever it costs, because Redbreast is really expensive,
Hmm.
leads me to kind of hold back on that. I never feel wrong drinking Quiet Man. It doesn't feel wasteful. Like if I have occasion to drink whiskey, but it's not a big enough occasion to drink an expensive whiskey, I don't have any financial uh, qualms about drinking Quiet Man.
Yeah, I did buy it once. It was painful. Delicious, but painful.
The Redbreast, yes.
Yeah. So it'll be a while before I buy that again.
Yeah, I
Quiet
had it
Man.
the last time I had it, somebody else bought it. So I was like, I'm and as financially cautious as I am with my own stuff, I'm even more so with the other people. So I'm like, I'm just gonna take a little bit.
Hmm.
We'll take advantage of another man's wallet.
Yeah. It's good stuff though.
Oh
One
yes.
could one could even say that it's poetry in a glass. And speaking of which, we're here, Chet, to chat about poetry this evening.
Okay, Michael Knowles, you can.
I use speaking of which as a line anyway, and that if that's inspired by Michael Knowles, it's only subconsciously.
It's a good point.
So, but we're here to chat about poetry this evening, and what is it, and its importance, and why we need it. And this is coming from somebody, I'm what you might call a normal guy. Uh, I go about my business. I mean, I read some books here and there. I love Lord of the Rings, and I can nerd out about it forever. But poetry is something that's always been challenging for me. I mean, there's some poems out there that are just simple and really beautiful and profound. But there's some poems that are profound, and I have no idea what they mean. Like I'm really, really struggling to pick out the meaning and what the author's trying to describe, what he's trying to say, because of the style or whatever else. And there were poems like that that I studied in college, and like I'm sure some people have an affinity for that. I just I don't. So to me and the rest of the people like me, educate me, Ethan, on why I'm wrong, why I should care. And maybe start with what poetry is to begin with.
Well, I wouldn't necessarily say that you're wrong. There are a lot of people that kind of say, I just don't get poetry. I don't get the point. I don't get what it's for. I just don't get it. I think everybody kind of has a vague understanding of what poetry is, but I'll read the Webster's Dictionary definition just because I can. So the definition of poetry is expression in poems collectively, poetic qualities, spirit, or feeling. So to go to the definition of a poem, a composition in verse, lofty or imaginative writing, or artistic expression. There are two kinds of writing: poetry and prose. Prose is just regular writing. Magazine article, short stories, your novels. That's what poetry is. Or that's what prose is. Rather, excuse me. Poetry is writing specifically in verse in an ordered fashion, typically in a lofty and artistic way. Usually, like comparing one thing to another thing. Sometimes the two get blended together. Poetry does very often rhyme, but it does not have to rhyme to be poetry. For example, the Iliad, the Odyssey, the Aeneid, Beowulf are all technically poetry. They are extended epic poems
Mm-hmm.
because they're in verse. And they're written in a certain way because they are written in order to sing, to
Oh,
be
really?
sung. Parts of them in order to be sung, but also when there is an intended rhythm, when there is an intended order to the writing, when it is read by somebody who knows how to correctly read it aloud, it grabs the attention differently.
Mm.
So the Iliad and the Odyssey were originally spoken word. They weren't written down anywhere. At some point, Homer was reciting it in a town square somewhere, and some kid sat down and wrote down what he was writing. Some scribe decided to take it down and said, "This might be nice later." But poetry is best and best experienced spoken. Poetry being read is still good, but it's best experienced when it's spoken. Because it uses the language, it uses the natural syllables and rhythm of the language and manipulates it in such a way that it is very pleasing to the ears and it is edifying to the mind. So in short, basically it is the art that adds beauty to language. It creates more beauty and order for the language. And actually, reading and understanding poetry will help you write and read and understand prose better, because you will understand a way to write in rhythm. And then it's actually even more accessible for other people. You can use higher language, and you can use a greater vocabulary, perhaps, or you can write in a much fancier and elegant way, and people will still understand you.
Mm-hmm.
Because there's something in the rhythm of poetry that makes it natural. It's all in the presentation. For example, if I were to say, in The Merchant of Venice, Portia says, "If to do were as easy as to know what were good to do, then chapels had been churches, and poor men's cottages princes' palaces. It is a good divine that follows his own instruction, but a hot temper leaps on. I could easier teach 20 what were good to be done than to be one of the 20 to follow mine own teaching." If you don't know where to put the syllables, where to put the inflections, if you don't know how to say that, then nobody gets it. There's a great old episode of the Danny Thomas Show. I bring everything back to old sitcoms because they're very often they're just right. Where his daughter has a part, she's playing Portia in her school.
Mm-hmm.
In The Merchant of Venice. And she is trying to learn the lines, and she is really bad. She's overacting it. She's overemphasizing. So then Danny, who is a nightclub performer, tries to teach her. And he's also really bad. And he winds up going, wait a minute, I get it. This takes place in Venice, right? She goes, yeah. And he goes, then I know what's wrong. Here, I'll fix it. As so good a diviner will follows his own instruction. And then it just cuts. But later, his son finds an Englishman in the park. Really, he's just a bum, but he's reciting Shakespeare, and he's doing it really well. So the son brings him home, and he gets hired as... He winds up getting hired as the daughter's Shakespearean coach. But he proves himself by interrupting Danny while Danny's in the middle of very badly reciting that soliloquy that I just did an excerpt of. And for context, the son, who is like 9 or 10 years old, has this entire time been complaining that he doesn't understand a word of it. And then when this gentleman comes in from the park and recites the soliloquy, the boy goes, "Oh, so that's what it means." When it is read correctly, anybody can understand it. Shakespeare built that theater for the common people, and the common people would come and see his plays. His vocabulary was still much greater than the vocabulary of the common person in England back in the day, because he was an educated man. But people still came to his plays and still understood them because they were so well performed.
Because there's more life to it than you can get just from a page.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
When you watching Hamlet and you hear, "Alas, poor Yorick, I knew him, Horatio," or to be or not to be, that is the question. When you hear it, unless you know how to read it, it comes on far better than when you are just reading it. And poetry is the same way. Technically, playwriting is prose, technically, but it's sort of the meeting point between poetry and prose. Now, poetry that everybody has access to is the Psalms.
Yeah, we don't think of those as poems, I guess.
They are.
But it
They're
works,
written
yeah.
in verse. They're intended to be sung in the temple.
Well, and they even say that in the headings. Psalm such and such is a song of praise from David.
Right. They're songs. They're intended to be sung in the temple during the sacrifice and during the regular Shabbat. And the Jews in the synagogues today, the cantor will sing them, and we, as Catholics, we will sing them as well. But they're still ultimately poems. They are verse, written word. You who dwell in the shelter of the Most High and abide in the shade of the Almighty. 1,000 may fall at your side, 10,000 at your right. You it will never approach, for his faithfulness is buckler and shield. Yeah, anybody can understand that.
Yeah, it's just funny how we wouldn't think of that as poetry normally, because it's the
And
Psalms, and
and
that's
with the
that's hard coded
Psalms,
in that it's.
yeah, with the Psalms, they're so deeply ingrained in the life of Americans and of in the West in general. Uh, that I think we don't notice it, but the Psalms are one of the best places to start in just looking at poetry. Once you realize, yes, this is poetry. And I think a lot of people listening to this will go, "Oh, okay, I kind of get poetry better now."
No, you've given a good explanation of the beauty of it, of what it lends to our own language, and by extension, what it lends to our own experience, I think. Right? I
Hmm.
mean, when we watch a story performed, um, in a way that is, like you said, you know, pleasing to the ear and edifying to the intellect, that does more than just reading it on a page. And perhaps, in a way, that's why when you were talking about some of that stuff earlier, like the image that came to my mind was me reading The Lord of the Rings to my kids one day, God willing, by the fire. You know, basically, what a vibe. You know,
Hmm.
but what an experience that would be. Getting to just not say, okay, you're gonna go read that in the corner, which is beautiful enough in and of itself, but no, now this is going to be story time. Now there's going to be a performative aspect to it. What hopefully whatever good I can render to the story in that way. You know, I don't have your love of impersonations, or I don't have your talent for impersonations. I wish I did. But even if I can't do that, like I'd like to think I'm still going to be adding something to the story by reading it and giving it in its reading a certain order, right? Because when you're reading, even if you're just reading a story, aren't you trying to give some sort of order to it? I mean, you
Yeah.
could just monotone read it page to page to page and other stuff, but no, like he says this, and then even in just a narration of what's going on, yeah, there'd be all sorts of ways to give order to a paragraph about the fellowship walking, right? And make that beautiful as an example. So that's kind of where my scattered thoughts are with it.
Well, good prose is the same as it's not the same thing as poetry, but it's a lot like poetry. Is you do need to know how to read it and you do need to know how to understand it, but it's not hard. There's all sorts of articles out there that'll help you, that give you advice on how to read poetry like a professor or how to read poetry like a scholar or one thing or the other. Why should we? Why should we want to read poetry like a professor?
I
Like
mean, tell
sit
me about it.
down and appreciate the poem for being a beautiful poem. Draw the message from it, draw the conclusions from it that hopefully you were intended to draw, but sit down and appreciate it. You don't have to go line by line and syllable by syllable and word by word and dissect it the
Hmm.
way that an English professor would. You don't have to be a professor to appreciate poetry any more than you have to be one to appreciate Shakespeare.
No, you don't.
You
And
don't
maybe,
for you don't have to have a master's degree or a doctorate. to appreciate under the spreading chestnut tree the village smithy stands any more than you have to have one to appreciate once more unto the breach once more and plug up the hole with our English dead. So why not learn to read poetry like a truck driver or an accountant or a taxman or an IT guy?
Hmm.
Why not learn to read poetry like an everyday guy?
Yeah, I mean that's a direct answer to my question about why should somebody in my position care, right? And you'd already given good answers to that before, but
You should care for the same reason that you should want to have beautiful art on your walls. Why you should have paintings and beautiful things in your home. You should surround yourself with beauty. Now, for me, it's not hard because I've got a beautiful wife and she's always here. But fill your house with beautiful things. Why? Because life would be very bland and dull and sad otherwise. You know, people might go, "Oh, why'd you buy that painting to hang on the wall? It's not doing any good for you." Yeah, I don't care. It is
no, it
doing
is.
good for me.
It is.
I don't care that you can't see. I do care that you can't see it because it makes me sad. And it is performing a function, and that is being a painting, being beautiful, and being something that we can learn from and draw conclusions about, or just sit and look at and take in. Poetry is the same way. There's a lot of people who are like, well, poetry doesn't accomplish anything. Yeah, it does. For one thing, it makes you smarter. I'm not really sure what the statistics are on that, but I think the people that frequently read and listen to good poetry, they're probably a little bit more down to earth and more quote unquote intelligent than the average person that does not. If you want something quantifiable, there it is. Now, that's not necessarily a good reason for poetry. You should read, the reason you should be reading poetry is just because you should be reading poetry. And poetry is good and poetry is beautiful. So partake in it.
And to your point about the mode and the way in which we ought to encounter poetry, and paintings for that matter, you know, treating or taking them in like an ordinary person and not like an academic. I mean, if I think about the academic way of doing that, yeah, it would be dissecting it word for word. What does this mean? And maybe getting into the deeper meanings of why, and you know, of why he chose this versus another thing, and what that may have meant in a particular context of the time. And it's like, yeah, you can
Mm-hmm.
get there through scientific study, um, of this work of art, of this poem, of this painting, whatever the case is. But you're probably better off, yeah, just consuming that like an ordinary person, and then letting the curiosity of an ordinary person take you deeper down. Like, why did he say that? What did this mean at the time? Oh, it meant this. And then you read it again, and you've learned something new. And then you
Mm-hmm.
naturally just ask yourself a different question. Um, learn some, learn something new. Read it again. It's a new thing. It's even more beautiful. Or you read it, um, and then you thought about it in the context of your life experiences and what you know, and that was really cool. And then you forget about it for a year, and then you go back to it, and now it's got a new meaning.
Yeah.
And my point with this is just approaching it like an ordinary person. It's more simple, and yet it's still evergreen. There's always something new. There's always something more beautiful. You know, why do people like me? Why do so many people love Lord of the Rings? Many reasons, but one of them is because it's evergreen. You know, I have read it a number of times. I've listened to content about it, in a number of ways. And yet, just going back through the Fellowship recently, like, learning about the conspirators and all this other stuff, like, I'm just struck by the beauty of it, of Tolkien's
Mm.
writing. And it's like, how many times did I gloss over that in the past? You know? And poetry's got to be the same way.
If something is good, it's good for all time and all places.
True.
If something is truly good, it is always good. Now, there may be, I like to say this about comedy to take a brief detour. Good comedy is always funny, no matter at what time you're viewing it. That's why there's a lot of comedy acts that don't last. And why a lot of comedy shows that don't really last, because half the humor is too timely and too topical.
You're fine for this place, but not for this other place.
Yeah, or, something that may have been a timely topical joke in 1987. It's probably not a timely or topical joke in 2025. But there are still general things that are hilarious that we can always laugh at. Like somebody being stuck in a closet with an inflatable life raft. That's funny. I don't know how many times that gag has been used. I don't know when the first time it was used, but I know that gag has been used repeatedly for 70 years.
And the fact that it has means something.
Yeah.
You don't even have to get the meaning of it to understand that.
And there doesn't even have to be a deeper meaning. Now, sometimes with poetry, that's the case too. There doesn't have to be some deep esoteric meaning to it. The only reason people search for deep esoteric meanings is so that they can feel smarter than everybody else in the room and make, by extension, everybody else feel dumber.
Yeah, my reaction to that is define deep. You know?
Find the deep esoteric meaning in I heard the bells on Christmas Day that anybody else cannot get. I heard
Yeah.
the bells on Christmas Day, their old familiar carols play. So loud and sweet their soft repeat of peace on earth, goodwill toward men. In despair I bowed my head. There is no peace on earth, I said, for hate is strong and mocks the song of peace on earth, goodwill to men. Then rang the bells more loud and deep, God is not dead, nor doth he sleep. The wrong shall fail, the right prevail, and peace on earth, goodwill to men. What
Yeah,
is deeper esoteric about that? Nothing.
you
It
could
is simple and it is beautiful.
yeah, you could try and find something edgy, I guess. Like when I think of trying to find a deep and esoteric meaning in that, it would be something edgy and it quite frankly just not worth your time. You know? Take it at face value for what it is, and you actually do have something that's deep, that is profound, that echoes and chimes throughout all of eternity.
Mm-hmm.
And you can't really beat that. You just can't. Your only job there is to just sit and soak it in and almost chant it back in unison, you know? And try and live that way.
This is why I like to make the argument that simpler is better in almost every case. Longfellow poems don't have anything, any high-minded philosophy. He was a good philosopher, but he didn't have high-minded philosophy or anything out of reach of the average person. They're just beautiful, and they're just astoundingly good. And I'll read another one to you in a little while.
Okay. Maybe we'll get to examples of good poems.
Yeah,
Just some examples.
just some that I happen to have within reach because I don't have them memorized, and I should. And as a side note, it's a good practice to memorize poetry. And then when you have it memorized, then you can practice different ways of reciting it. Because it can sometimes be a little bit clumsy trying to read it and recite it at the same time. Because then your mind is processing the reading, processing the words,
Hmm.
and then processing speaking them back out. So you're actually making it twice as difficult. So when you are, say you're learning your lines for a play or something,
Hmm.
or when you're learning the poem, you should be thinking about how you would say it and maybe read it aloud to yourself a couple of times. Don't make it performative right away.
Doesn't have to be right away, yeah, performative, but here's a way in which you could make it performative. And I'm gonna twist the meaning of the word performative. If you're thinking of a poem, and even though I don't, even though I don't do this with poems, I still think I have the authority to say this. Um, if you're if you're doing that with a poem, if you're thinking about it a bunch, if you're trying to memorize it, even trying to recite it, you're going to try and live that out. And there's going to be different situations in life where you can use that as a motivation, as a rallying cry, to get you through this moment or this day, or try and live a better life or make a better decision. And that can be multiple different situations for the same piece of poetry. The reason I know that's the case is because we do that with songs all the time. Now, you can't exactly do that with a Taylor Swift song, or at least you ought not to. Um, but could you do it with a number of like praise and worship songs? Absolutely. And you don't have to consider those like great poetic works or anything like that. But like my point still holds. It is a it is a work of some poetry. It is a work of beauty. It is a work that is sung. And in singing it, we can help live it out. Right?
Mm.
Sounds like a good idea. So, yeah. So thanks for giving me a reason to care about poems. More than just one.
If you want another, there's a good quote from St. Josemaria Escriva that I get from this little book, Rhymes Reasons by Mike Aquilina.
Okay.
I'm not sponsored in any way by Mike Aquilina or Scepter. Oh, this is from Scepter. Huh. Anyway, this is very good. I recommend it. Basically, is a good introduction to poetry for the common man. And that's basically how he starts it. He basically says, I'm an expert in absolutely nothing. I know a little bit about a lot of things, and I'm just an ordinary guy. And
Still
I did
qualified to
meet
write a
Mike
book.
Aquilina. I met Mike Aquilina once, and he's a really nice guy.
So in other words, if he can write that book, then we can do this podcast.
And the quote from Saint Jose Maria that he uses, who is probably one of the greatest saints of the 20th century, it is very much our mission to transform the prose of this life into poetry, into heroic verse.
The ordinary into the extraordinary.
Mm-hmm.
The standard into the beautiful.
Yeah,
The
that
good
was
into the
kind of
great.
Saint Jose Maria's whole thing. So,
Yeah. But this, again, is the ordinary guy interpreting this. I've never heard that before.
translate the prose of this life into heroic verse. Beowulf, the Iliad, the Odyssey, the Aeneid, the Lord of the Rings. Epic poetry. It is interesting that Tolkien chose prose to write the Lord of the Rings and not verse, because it is meant to be an epic and an epic myth. But everything that he based it off of would have been written in verse. It would have been poetry. We can draw whatever we want from that, but it's.
Hmm.
I'm not going in any particular direction, but it was an interesting choice. That might have been a publisher's recommendation.
It would have had to been given very early on. I'll say that. But
Basically,
yeah,
something to make it more accessible to people, because most people, even at that time, probably didn't know how to read poetry
maybe.
and probably would have made it less academic.
You know what, though? I'm totally fine with that decision.
I'm totally okay with it. Look, I love good prose as much as I love good poetry.
Hmm.
And anybody that has read at least the opening paragraph of The Wheel of Time knows what I'm talking about.
I can't remember it word for word, but I almost can. Just from hearing you, like, say it once or twice, which speaks to it
It
being good, I
is
think.
astounding.
Hmm.
Or even if you've just read the last sentence of the last paragraph of The Lord of the Rings. And there was a light in the window and a fire within, and he was expected. Just as beautiful as any other form of poetry. Now, poetry is not higher than prose, than good prose.
Hmm.
It is higher than bad prose, but bad poetry is still really bad. The beatniks and the hovels with the bongos and the snapping, that's bad.
Hmm.
Slam poetry is a stain and a cancer on our society and needs to be cut out.
Yeah, calling poetry higher than prose is only true in a sense. No. It's like saying the priesthood is higher than the married life in a sense. It's like
Yeah,
true,
it's
but
comparing the two. True, but you need both of them still.
you need both of them, you know. And a bad priest is not higher than a
So
good family. Like
I would
that's not
say
how this works.
bad poetry is worse than bad prose. Really good poetry is a little bit better than good poetry, or than good prose.
That works.
I would
Well,
say
because
that,
the standards are
and
higher
that
for the
still
one, right?
balances it out because the average is still about the same.
Is that because the standards are higher, and so bad
I think just
poetry is more of an affront than bad prose is?
probably, probably it's like bad art.
Yeah.
Like, bad art is just insulting to the viewer.
Hmm.
Like, you look at a piece of canvas with some smudging on it and you're just insulted.
Yeah, compare that to just a bad comment on the internet, and you just pass over that and don't
And,
really think
and
twice.
then you see the bad painting and with the smud the piece of canvas with smudges, and the artist is like, "Oh, I call it paint on canvas. It's my greatest work." Sure. And then you look at Caravaggio's Call of Matthew. You look at what can actually be done by somebody who knows what he's doing with a paintbrush.
Yeah.
You look at the Call of Matthew. You look at the altarpiece of the Sistine Chapel. Or if you look at a kind of more recent painter, Bouguereau, William Adolphe Bouguereau, Innocence, Song of the Angels. Some of my favorite paintings of all time. Very realist, humanist,
Hmm.
uh, authentic paintings of Our Lady. Absolutely astounding. Beautiful.
Oh, wow. I should look at those. I never heard of them. I may have seen some of his stuff, but
You have definitely seen some of it.
okay.
Queen of the Angels, uh, Innocence, and Song of the Angels are his three biggest works. I'm positive that you have seen at least one of those
Okay.
at some point. But anyway, poetry is also, there's a lot of. I feel like poetry has been stigmatized in the last half century or so
Hmm.
as
How
well.
so?
Along with all the other arts, the performing arts and everything else. There was this idea that men need to be tough and macho and only like football and baseball and sports and guns and rah. And you should like sports and guns because sports and guns are awesome. But basically, you should like those things to the exclusion of poetry and the ballet and classical music and art and literature. The bookworm is the kid that gets picked on,
Yeah.
stereotypically. Maybe not so much anymore. Or that, the man should have the responsibility to only pursue the things that are useful. And that poetry stuff, that's for girls with feelings.
It sounds very capitalist. It sounds very
Yeah, now you know
productivity
another reason I
matters.
don't like, another reason why I don't like capitalism. And not just productivity, monetizable productivity. Like, no, you need to be getting a real job. You shouldn't be a poet. Oh, really? You know what John Quincy Adams said? I am a warrior so that my son can be a merchant. And my son will be a merchant so that his son can be a poet.
Hmm.
We want poets. We want men who will bring beauty and light to the world.
Wow. I like that.
And we will fight to even 2 generations later have poets.
Well, I guess in the order that I'm at, my sons are all going to be soldiers then. The cycle will just have to restart.
Yeah, so will mine. But I'll be just
No,
as
that
proud of them. But if you think that poetry is just for girls with feelings, for one thing, you've never wooed a woman properly. Good poetry is a very good aid for that.
duly noted.
If you can sidle up to your lady love and speak softly into her ear, shall I compare thee to a summer's day? Thou art more lovely and more temperate.
Yeah.
A lot of women tend to melt when you say things like that. I know my wife does.
Hmm.
But also, there are incredibly manly poems.
Hmm.
The Charge of the Light Brigade. It's somewhat tragic, but it's still incredibly manly. Half a league, half a league, half a league onward, and into the valley of the shadow of death rode the 600. Theirs is not to reason why, theirs is but to do and die. And into the valley of the shadow of death rode the 600. I don't have the whole poem memorized, I'm just reciting what I remember.
Hmm. Well, we all recognize that though.
But, men desire their last stand. Horatius at the bridge. Forget who wrote that poem, but that one's also very, very good. It's a longer one. But it tells the story of Horatio, this great hero of Rome, who stood alone at a bridge and held off an army, even just to buy time. There's Chesterton's Lepanto, which is about Don Juan of Austria riding to the sea to face the Ottoman threat and turn it back, if he can. And the intercession of the Blessed Mother, which won the day. Our Lady of Victory. And I could go on and on. There's example after example of good, genuine, manly poetry.
Yeah. But we all experience that need, right? I mean, like you said, there's a reason why even though I'm no soldier, even though I have no desire to be that, I still find something appealing about it.
Yeah,
I still love the song I Want to Be in the Cavalry.
yeah.
I still love the song Northwest Passage. And if I get really melancholic, I love to death the song Bilbo's Last Song by Clamave de Profundis.
Mm.
Like
I
I
sit
want that.
beside the fire and think, well,
Not
that I
that.
have seen. Not that
Not
one?
that one. No, it's literally called Bilbo's Last Song.
Oh, I don't know that I've
Listen,
heard that one.
listen to it and just know that if I die first, you're in charge of playing that at the funeral reception. Okay?
I will sing it at the funeral reception,
Do that too.
if I can handle it.
Do that too. It is so beautiful. Um,
But, well, there's also the Lament for Boromir.
I hope I live a life unworthy of that song. How about that?
So do I. But I may make a practice of it in my home to have that sung every Veterans Day or every Memorial Day.
Or the Lament for the Rohirrim.
The Lament for the Rohirrim. Where now the horse and the rider?
There's the helm and the hauberk, and the bright hair flowing. Yeah. So in other words, guys we desire a last stand. We desire a good death. We desire to live for something worth living for.
And we desire to fight and
You
die for
know?
things that are worth fighting and dying for.
And even if we spend our entire life, doom scrolling or something, that doesn't go away.
Yeah.
It's just built in.
Actually, it makes the doom scrolling that much sadder.
Yeah.
Because then you're not taking up the spiritual combat that you should be.
Yeah. I mean, but all of these things that we're listing as examples, they are poetry. Because what better way to convey it? What higher way to convey it? And again, even though I'm an ordinary guy that doesn't go seeking out poetry for the sake of seeking out poetry, I recognize that. I recognize the importance of it, and I will die on the hill of it is important.
All right. So I want to start wrapping up with some examples of very, very good poetry. And I will do homage to my mother-in-law, and I will read her favorite poem, at least one of Henry Wadsworth Longfellow's The Children's Hour. Between the dark and the daylight, when the night is beginning to lower, comes a pause in the day's occupations that is known as the children's hour. I hear in the chamber above me the patter of little feet, the sound of a door that is open, and voices soft and sweet. From my study I see in the lamplight, descending the broad hall stair, grave Alice and laughing Allegra, and Edith with golden hair. A whisper and then a silence, yet I know by their merry eyes they are plotting and planning together to take me by surprise. A sudden rush from the stairway, a sudden raid from the hall. By 3 doors left unguarded, they enter my castle wall. They climb up into my turret, or the arms of and back of my chair. If I try to escape, they surround me. They seem to be everywhere. They almost devour me with kisses. Their arms about me entwine, till I think of the Bishop of Bingen in his mouse tower on the Rhine. Do you think, O blue-eyed banditti, because you have scaled the wall, such an old mustache as I am is not a match for you all? I have you fast in my fortress, and I will not let you depart, but put you down into the dungeon in the round tower of my heart. And there I will keep you forever, yes, forever and a day, till the walls shall crumble to ruin and molder and dust away. And if you don't think, after hearing that, that Henry Wadsworth Longfellow is the greatest poet in American history, you can take your podcast business someplace else.
I mean, my reaction is just to quote you from the last podcast, which is, that's the life right there.
Mm-hmm.
Like, my goodness.
Especially that line, that second to last stanza. I have you fast in my fortress, and will not let you depart, but put you down into the dungeon in the round tower of my heart. And he wrote that for his daughters. And it's, despite what some people think, there are good reasons for a grown man to cry. And sometimes thinking of his daughter's smile is one of them. And having a little girl myself, I'm sure Longfellow would agree. All a daughter has to do is smile. And her father just melts. And all she has to do is say, I love you. And he is at her command. I don't think little girls know the power that they have over their fathers.
And we are wise to not tell them.
And it takes an unbelievable amount of willpower for me to not bend to my daughter's every wish. And yes, even that of my son. Because my son has a certain smile that he'll flash. That the only word I can use to describe it is charm. He has the charm of Baron.
Mm.
And my daughter the loveliness of Luthien. Which, being a father, I have a natural inclination to worry. I first worry that they'll abuse such powers. But then I realize that I have only to teach them. And when they're grown and gone, it's out of my hands.
It sounds like how our Lord treats us, right?
Yeah.
The power that he gives us. All the ways we can abuse it, but who cares? Because we're awesome. And he will teach us and lead us, but no, we're more awesome than we can imagine. We're more wretched than we can imagine, but we're also more awesome than we can imagine. So maybe we should smile at our Lord more. Maybe that is a good prayer. To just smile at God.
Or just to embrace him.
Yeah.
You know, every day when I come home from work, I walk through the door and I hear them yell, Daddy. And they rush to me. And throw their arms around me. You know, one day when the weather was nice and my wife came to the door to welcome me home and opened the door, my daughter was there and she couldn't wait. She rushed out of the house to me as I was coming down the walk. And that's how we ought to be to our Lord.
Yeah.
Especially to God the Father, the first person of the Trinity, to whom we don't give enough love. We may give him fear, and we may cower from his discipline, but we don't run to him. We don't say Abba. We don't say Daddy. We don't throw our arms around him. But he has locked us away forever, down in the deep dungeon in the round tower of his heart. And when he keeps us there forever and a day, we are there forever and eternity. I'll also say, as an aside, Longfellow in that poem is a parenting goal because it is very obviously past these little girls' bedtime, but he doesn't care. He just wants to be near his girls.
As you should be.
That's the life.
That is a life.
Now, if that were the only poem that I had prepared, then I would leave it at that, especially because I feel like I'm about to cry. But I will pivot to Robert Louis Stevenson. Yes, the Treasure Island one. And Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, because who doesn't love Treasure Island? The poem, I believe this poem is actually on his headstone. And I think that's why he wrote it.
So from family joy to death. Got it.
But it is a good death. And it is a good remembrance of death. This is Stevenson's Requiem. Under the wide and starry sky, dig the grave and let me lie. Glad did I live, and gladly die, and I laid me down with a will. This be the verse you grave for me. Here he lies where he longed to be. Home is the sailor, home from the sea, and the hunter, home from the kill.
It's peaceful. My work is done. I am finished.
My, my grandfather's last words were, "I'm done." Basically that. Here is the sailor home from the sea, and the hunter home from the kill. I have come home, never to leave again. And now I rest. Glad did I live and gladly die. I have no regrets.
When it's identified with coming home, then too.
Yeah, which
Yeah, it's
hopefully your death will be a homecoming.
yeah, but it's
Hopefully
not.
God will welcome you back into his arms and into his presence, which is where you belong in the first place.
But that's more poetic than you know a hunter dying in the killing, and that being the
Yeah,
theme, or a sailor dying in the sea and down to Davy Jones's locker. You know, not
it's
saying
that he
that's
has come
not.
home.
It's not saying it's bad, but yeah, he's come home. One ends at death, one persists on.
And I think everybody would agree that it is, while it is good and noble, and while it is valiant and honorable to die in battle, everybody wants the soldier to die at home in his bed, surrounded by his family, surrounded by his generations. There's not a soldier's family in this world who doesn't want to see their father, brother, husband, or son come riding down the driveway.
It's like Sam came home at the end.
And there is not a soldier's family in this world that will not have a fire within and a warm meal on the table and expect him. Hey, dear. Would you grab me a Lepanto, please? So I'll read a brief excerpt from Chesterton's poem of the Battle of Lepanto. And the thing about poems like this is it does require some understanding of the story to get the whole poem. But basically, the short version is that the Ottoman fleet is coming and has its eyes on Rome. And if they take Rome, that's it. So the Pope, knowing that they are coming, has sent out a call asking for help from the Holy League, which was a post-Reformation coalition of royals, kings, and princes, basically who had taken an oath to protect holy sites and protect the Pope if the call was to go out. Well, he sends out this call, and the only one that actually answers is a bastard son of Spain. He's called Don Juan of Austria, but he is a Spaniard.
I don't
He's a
think that's
ba-
how it works. Because he still gets ships from Venice and Genoa and Spain and
He
I
gets the
think Spain. I
ships,
don't think.
yes. They provide ships, but they don't provide very much to him. That he is the only one who is actually willing to lead this fight. He is the only one actually willing to get up out of his chair and do something. And when he goes to the other leaders, they kind of hand wave you like, yeah, 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 sure, 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 sure. Take my men, take my ships, whatever you need, just take them. You're doing this so I don't have to. But so this stanza of the play,
By the way, I think that's what I get for my knowledge of Lepanto coming from a historical fiction work about it. So some things may have been twisted, although that historical fiction work is awesome.
it's a Lewis de Wool book, so it's probably very well researched and very good, and that might be an error on my part. But Don Juan of Austria was the only European nobleman that responded properly. No other king, none of the kings of Europe responded. And Chesterton makes that clear in this poem as well.
Hmm.
Yeah, here in this verse here. King Philip's in his closet with the fleece about his neck. Don John of Austria is armed upon the deck.
Yeah, one provided resources, one provided himself.
Yeah. One of these days we will do an actual dissection of this poem, and we will talk about the actual day and the actual battle because it is worth talking about. But here's a good example. So the Christian forces of the Holy League have met the Ottoman forces at a place called Lepanto, which is off the coast of Italy, I believe, someplace. And it's not going well. The battle is not going well. The Holy League ships are getting sunk one after another. Their men are dropping like flies. Everything is going poorly because the Ottomans have the wind on their side. So Don Juan of Austria sends out a messenger to the Pope. And the Pope, I forget who was the Pope at the time.
Pope Pius the Fifth, I believe.
Was that Pius V?
I'm gonna guess so. It was a
Because
Pius
he was the
something.
Pope at the Council of Trent.
May have been him. I swear it's a
Anyway,
Pius something.
that sounds right.
Hmm.
If we're wrong, somebody correct us. But the Pope then gathers as many people as he can into St. Peter's Square and they all pray the rosary. And then this happens. The Pope was in his chapel before day or battle broke. Don John of Austria is hidden in the smoke. The hidden room in man's house where God sits all the year, the secret window whence the world looks small and very dear. He sees as in a mirror on the monstrous twilight sea the crescent of his cruel ships, whose name is mystery. They fling great shadows forwards, making cross and castle dark. They veil the plumed lions on the galleys of St. Mark. It's the Venetian ships. And above the ships are palaces of brown, black-bearded chiefs. And below the ships are prisons, where with multitudinous griefs, Christian captives, sick and sunless, all a laboring race repines, like a race in sunken cities, like a nation in the mines. They are lost like slaves that swat, and in the skies of morning hung the stairways of the tallest gods where tyranny was young. They are countless, voiceless, hopeless, as those fallen or fleeing on before the high king's horses in the granite of Babylon. And many a one grows witless in his quiet room in hell, where a yellow face looks inward through the lattice of his cell. And he finds his God forgotten, and he seeks no more a sign. But Don John of Austria has burst the battle line. The wind changed after the prayers of the Pope and the people of Rome, then favored the Holy League, which proceeded to trample the Ottoman forces, mount their ship, board the enemy ships, and free the captive slaves. Free and arm the slaves, thereby increasing their numbers, and ultimately winning the day. And that was an excerpt of that. We will go through the whole poem. It is a very long poem.
You can get the sense of that potentially just from the excerpt you read.
The last stanza, because one of the soldiers at Lepanto was a young Spaniard by the name of Miguel Cervantes.
Mm-hmm.
Cervantes on his galley sets the sword back in the sheath. Don Juan of Austria rides homeward with a wreath. And he sees across a weary land a straggling road in Spain, up which a lean and foolish knight forever rides in vain. And he smiles, but not as sultans smile, and settles back the blade. But Don John of Austria rides home from the crusade. And this battle is one of the reasons that they think Cervantes wrote Don Quixote. Because in Don John of Austria is one of the last great examples of chivalry.
In short, what a guy.
Yeah.
But also what a battle. I mean, if we don't win, if the Holy League doesn't win that battle, just imagine how much world history changes. It's radical.
Yeah, because the Protestant Reformation has just happened. And that's part of the reason that nobody is coming to help. Because all of the German princes are fighting amongst themselves. And they're too busy with their petty squabbles to notice the Ottoman threat.
Yeah, and the Spaniards might be concerned with William of Orange at the time. So
Possibly. Or, no, William of Orange was much earlier.
Again,
No,
I'm leaning
the
on my historical fiction book, but
the line
I
that
think it's somewhere
that
in there.
Chesterton wrote was that the King of Spain would rather wear his fancy clothes and look in a mirror than actually come and help. Now, things are embellished for the sake of poetry and for the sake of verse, but read Lepanto if you think that poetry isn't manly, and then again tell me that poetry isn't manly.
But then Don Juan of Austria bursts the battle line. It's a great line.
Yeah.
After, and it's a single line response. I'm sure there's more after it. I know there's more
Hmm.
after it. But it's a single line response as you presented it to the hell that those slaves are going through,
Hmm.
right?
And the loss of hope that the Pope is starting to feel.
Yeah.
In his chapel, looking out the window, and he can see what's happening.
The, yeah, the depth of despair. Even if the despair is not a hopeless despair, it's still a despair. Reminds me in Lord of the Rings when, in front of the Black Gate, hope died in their chests, as Tolkien
Mm.
puts it. And it's like, that's a great way to describe it.
Yeah.
Because they still fight. And they still have some sort of hope, perhaps, some sort of faith. But that's a line that describes it. Just like Chesterton's lines describe, again, what those slaves are going through. You
And
know,
you can feel that.
yeah, like you could imagine you were in hell. You could imagine that you were in that place, being forced to row against your comrades, your countrymen, your brothers and sisters in Christ, with you know that you're serving the side with greater numbers. You may know what the wind is like. You may know have an idea of what the battle is going like. Just the overwhelming message of you can do nothing.
And with the slave master potentially taunting you and sneering at you the whole time.
Yeah. Like how would you keep your spirits high? You just wouldn't.
No,
Only
no.
the very best of men might. But then Don Juan of Austria burst the battle line, and that not only burst the battle line, but burst the sky open, right?
Yeah. Suddenly there's cannon fire, there's a noise above the deck, and the cage opens.
Mm-hmm.
And now there's a Spaniard handing swords down to you.
Mm-hmm. And there is sunlight in more ways than one. Yeah. I
This
should
is
read it
what
in full.
poetry is for.
Or rather, we're going to read it in full together.
Yes, we will in the coming, and as we end, in the coming weeks, we will be going through various great poems, maybe dissecting them or just reading them, just sitting and reading poetry to each other. Because, not enough people do that. And that may be, we won't do it every week, but it may be a semi regular thing that we do.
Mm-hmm.
Read poetry and talk about it.
It sounds like a worthy thing to do around the fire. Actually, a very worthy thing.
So, that will be coming in the coming weeks. And we do take requests.
Yes.
So, drop us a line, leave us a comment, let us know what you'd like us to read and talk about.
Mm-hmm.
As long as it's not slam poetry, I'm kind of open to anything.
Yeah.
Or
If you
Poe. I
send
don't
a
like Poe.
if you send a slam poetry, don't put it above me to create a wall of shame that is public somehow. You'll be anonymized on it, but
Yeah, we'll have your
uh,
name
uh,
blocked
uh,
out, but your
it'll
comment will be there.
it'll be there. So that would be right up my sense of humor to do such a thing. Anyway, send us good suggestions, and we'll see you next time.